For more on this about China's central bank announcement, we welcome Perry Wong, Managing Director of Research at the Milken Institute. And you heard Lloyd Blankfein there essentially downplaying some of the concerns that we've heard in the past. And I want to get your reaction to what he said and also what the PBOC is doing as well.
Well, I think in essence, I think as the second largest economy by some measure at this point, China can do a lot. And I think China also in transition as well, I think itself, financial markets and also the real sector both. And I think given that number, China's 7.4 growth last year and also anticipated 7% growth for this year, I think it's a very respectable number. And I do think that so far, the monetary policy does work in China, and also reacting to the depression on the price, and actually, fortunately, also I think see some improvement on the pricing in the current release of data. So we have a 1.4% year over on CPI, and which is very good. So I think the Chinese will play a bigger part. And liberalization of RMB has been in process. It's not something new, and I think that will continue as the Chinese government claimed a year and a half ago. So it will go deeper, and then we do see there's a lot of opportunity in that space.
It seems like to me, as you look at the pressure from within China and also outside of China, inflation, as you say, relatively muted for the most part. Growth ratcheted down. A lot of people say it's sustainable, and then you have all the different outside factors. But when we talk about the Chinese central bank raising and lowering rates, every time they make a move, a lot of people come out and say it's not about the rates, it's not about the interest rates, it's not about the inflation, it's much more about the reforms. And I wonder if you agree with that.
I think I don't want to make an absolute case. I think we do see that the motivation, I think, in adjusting the rates and opening up further on whether it's the bandwidth for the Chinese exchange rate or the exchange rates, or to give a bigger bandwidth, and now is no bandwidth on the interest rate and to some extent. And both, I think, are policy and reform, I think, agenda. On the second hand, if you look at some of the reaction from central bank, and certainly they now have a lot of tools to fine-tune the lending credit issue, liquidity, I think to counter the pressure on deflation. And I think so far they have done a marvelous job.
This discussion that a lot of people were having regarding the direct trading of the Chinese yuan. We've seen other cities around the world begin to take that on. And maybe you can help explain for our international audience why this is such a big deal.
I think it's a big deal if a region that has very substantial trade relationship with China, or for that matter, Pacific in general, perhaps they would have a center in that location, and that can facilitate better trading, and also I think make convenience, if you will, on hedging risk. So all those make a good bet for cities such as Los Angeles or New York, say U.S. Base since I'm here. So I definitely would think that there is an advantage for that to occur. Now, I think the city, for all they want, I think they can start the talk and they can start to move the process forward. But I think still there's a need for China and United States to come to some agreement on how to go about.
Perry, when you look at the economic numbers out of China and the policies that are being talked about right now, what's the most concerning to you? What's the biggest challenge they face?
I think the real sector side, I do see that there are alignment, I think, need to be made in China's industry. I think there's a little bit of concern on the overcapacity in some industry, and particularly in the industry that have been helping China grow in the past decade and a half. And there are tremendous pricing and profit pressure, and maybe they can realign those industry. And I also want to comment on a little bit on the energy sector. Perhaps there's something that can be done to probably make the sector more competitive. And those are not new news. I think if you follow the Chinese policy development, those are the sectors that are being mentioned. And by doing so, perhaps that would make the Chinese industry more competitive, despite the rising of the labor costs in China.
We recently got the announcement that they're going to allow more foreign investment into China, into more industries, I should say. And I'm wondering if that caught you by surprise and how you think that might ultimately impact money flows.
I think it's beyond money flow actually. China now is in the stage that they need to have higher end products. And some of those management process, logistics, R&D, I think there are still plentiful of good opportunity for the Chinese company to invite technology management in. And at the same time, also the higher end producer may look into China and see what they can play with in the Chinese market as the income rising rather rapidly in China and the consumer base is enlarging very rapidly, and those are a good opportunity. So on the money flow, I think that goes back to, I think, some of the concern on the exchange rate in RMB. I think that go hand in hand with trading, both in service and in goods trade. And I think I wouldn't be too concerned, caught up with the exchange rate. I think that would I think the reform would further push to a positions that the producer and consumer can have more selections from their perspective.